Boaters and sailors of Reddit, what is the scariest or most unexplainable thing you've experienced at sea? My father raced a 42-foot sailboat from Marion, MA to Bermuda, twice. He said the scariest part of it was just how utterly pitch black dark it is out there on a cloudy moonless night. They had to reset a breaker or something like that, and had to turn the running lights off at one point. Dad said it was nearly impossible to tell if his eyes were open or closed. On the other hand, he said seeing the clear night sky full of stars with zero light pollution was absolutely breathtaking. It wasn't until then that he understood how ancient celestial navigation was possible. I want to see a truly dark night sky so goddamn badly. 1. Sailing through the Bahamas. You can sometimes get relatively calm spots of water even if the wind is blowing a good 10-15 knots. One night it was that eerie sort of calm, clear, and I was at the helm by myself. We sailed through a patch of phosphorescent bacteria and the ocean glittered in such a way that you couldn't tell where the sky ended and the water began. It felt like I was sailing through space. 2. A guy in Florida gave the boat I was on coordinates for somewhere between the Turks and Caicos Banks and Hispaniola, saying there was something mind-blowing out there and we had to check it. I guess he told the captain what it was, but he wanted to keep it a surprise. When we reached the coordinates, which required some motoring, we found a source of constant bubbling. We didn't really understand what it was until the captain threw a bucket over the side and filled it up from the bubbling water, and drank out of it. It was a pillar of fresh water coming from some vent in the ocean floor. Bizarre. Wow, never heard pillars of water like that before. Very cool. I caught a halibut in the middle of the ocean in Alaska and found a Titleist golf ball in his stomach. That was weird. 1,000,000-to-1 shot, Jerry. 1,000,000-to-1. I delivered a sailboat from Clearwater, Florida to the Big Bend area of Florida. Going straight across puts me about 75 miles offshore at the farthest. It turned out to be flat calm, no breeze at all, so we motored the whole way, just about at the farthest point offshore, 60 to 75 miles at least. I saw a black dot on the horizon. As we got closer it turned out to be a 12-foot aluminum John boat with about a 6-horsepower outboard motor and 3 guys in it, at least 60 plus miles from shore. I wouldn't trust a boat like that more than about how far I could swim from shore. I went right past them, stopped and asked if they were okay. One of them looked at me like I was crazy. Of course we are. Well, okay then. Good luck. Dudes, do you know that we're at least 60 plus miles from shore? Nice. I have a lot of family in the Clearwater area. Sounds like those guys could have been up to something sketchy like drug running or something. I've been in one of those John boats on a lake and didn't feel all that secure. I was in my 15-foot boat about 2 miles out in Donegal Bay fishing over a sandbank. Looking back to shore about 300 meters off my stern between me and the shore, a periscope came out of the water and went back down in about a minute and a half. We Irish don't have any subs in our navy, so I have no idea who the heck that was. Strange looking blunt-faced dolphins coming up to the bow to just stare at us. These particular dolphins looked like they were from another planet, but after some research they were, in fact, of this planet lol. If a strange, pale, half octopus looking creature was making a ruckus on the roof of your home, you'd probably stare too. The closest thing to anything remotely resembling a human that those creatures have ever seen was probably a starfish. A starfish. My father and I were sailing from Key West to Tampa. Takes about a week. Like midnight we saw running lights ahead of us. Green and red. Was too dark and hazy to see anything besides the lights. Followed them for 3 hours or so before we heard a really loud noise. Kinda like when an old wood door opens but really deep. Then the lights were gone. Haze cleared up about an hour later, and we could see ocean in every direction during the sunrise. Nothing there. On a lighter note, that same trip at around 4 AM a few days later my dad was at the helm and I was napping on the deck, and I heard him yell out in a panic. Turns out he was nodding off and a flying fish hit him right in the face. It was still flopping around on deck, haha. Probably just old Greg. I was sailing from Chicago to South Haven, Michigan at night. We were hit but such a bad storm halfway it blew all the swallows 45 miles out to sea. Because they could see our masthead at night time they all tried to land on it. So every time lightning struck, like every half second for 6 hours, All you could see was the deck covered in dead birds. Gave my friend a solo cup and told him to start scooping. Very weird stuff. What a nice captain you are. So, I recently just finished working with a privately owned research and educational group doing a population survey of the sharks and stingrays in the Gulf of Mexico. Anyways, one day we pull in our line and find one of the sharks we caught had died on the line, probably due to the heavy current that day, which sucks, but happens like once every 2 months, so it's pretty rare. Using this opportunity, we first did a dissection on the shark for the students, and then put the shark on our line as bait. The shark was only about 2.5 feet long, and bigger sharks like bull sharks and hammerheads love small sharks like that. We put the line out and hung the shark right on this big boy we used to mark where the line is. We also do this because if a big shark takes the bait, the bull will splash and alert us. It'll also keep the shark near the surface and unable to dive, which makes pulling them onto the boat for tagging and data acquisition easier. About a half hour passes, and things are dead still out on the water. No wind, no waves, and no noise. Hot and still and silent. Then, out of nowhere, boosh, a huge splash. The bull rockets into the air from underwater and smacks the surface. And then nothing. We race over, pull in our line, and find nothing. As in, the shark we had hooked was completely gone. The airplane cable we used to attach our bait to the line was snapped clean in half. The steel cable rated at a 7,000 pound break strength was cleanly snapped. So there's something out there, just 5 miles off the coast of Florida, big enough to swallow a 2.5 feet shark and snap a metal cable in a single bite. Food for thought. I think you're going to need a thicker cable. My wife and I were honeymooning in St. Lucia 5 years ago. The resort we stayed at offered a catamaran cruise to the Pitons. It was great. Free drinks, great scenery, weather was perfect. The cruise drops us off at some town to check out the sulfur volcano and a waterfall. Time comes to board for the ride back to the resort. I say to my wife, I really want to sit by the cargo net at the bow to get the breeze and spray so we can cool off. Of course she wants to sit somewhere else. We almost break into a mini argument, and while that is going on, some other couples grab the spot around the net. No big deal. We find a spot a little bit behind where I wanted to be. About halfway back, some kind of game fish leaps out of the sea, through the cargo net and literally into the lap of the guy of the couple who wound up where I wanted to sit. Everyone is kind of amazed at first. Then the guy starts wrestling with whatever kind of fish it was. I couldn't quite figure out what it was. It all happened kind of quick. It was about 3-4 feet long and seemed to be 40-50 pounds. After about 4-5 seconds, the fish drops back through the net and this guy's wife starts screaming. Blood is pouring out of this guy's leg, being pretty much right behind him. I got a good look at the 5-inch gash the fish's fins must have put in him. I could see that fatty looking substance and I knew things had gone pretty bad. He managed to get his feet diced up too. The boat had to pull off at the next resort and drop this couple off so he could get immediate medical attention. We could hear the sirens making their way towards us as we shoved off again. And, to top it off, we saw him at the airport when we were leaving like 4 days later in a wheelchair. Not the way you want to spend your honeymoon, but I was glad he made it through. To this day I still think that my wife or I should have been the one in that wheelchair or worse. Your wife must own you in every argument that has taken place since this incident. My great uncle has an old fisherman's tale which he swears is true, but I'm really not sure I believe him. He said he wouldn't believe anybody unless he saw it himself either, but maintains that he saw it. A billfish stuck in the side of a whale. I was on a NOAA charting job in the Gulf of Mexico when Katrina came through. We stayed offshore Galveston as it hit Louisiana and then eventually sailed to the mouth of the Mississippi. We were a survey ship and our new job was to determine if there were any sunken vessels in the Mississippi Channel that would close it. During the night we would keep station right outside the mouth of the river. Hundreds of cargo vessels showed up over the first few days, ships that normally would have gone up the river and done their thing. They all called for pilots to take them up the river, and no response of course. It looked like an amazing city offshore while onshore was pitch black. It was amazing, very post-apocalyptic. Slowly over a week or so the ships left, sent to other ports to do their cargo business. We were heading out to our normal spot at the end of the jetties, and we suddenly noticed that the entire visible sea around us was covered in dead Gulf menhaden, several square miles of rotting fish floating on the surface. After throwing up, I do not normally have a weak stomach. We called our local parks and wildlife hotline. They said yeah, that happens sometimes. Heavy rains wash pollution out and down the Mississippi. You probably shouldn't eat any of it, was the weirdest, nastiest, and saddest thing I think I have seen at sea. Coast Guard here. I've sailed the Caribbean, Atlantic and Pacific. Coolest things I have seen have been an oarfish, sunfish, dead whale that started a shark feeding frenzy, several waterspouts, a leatherback turtle the size of a Volkswagen, blue whale, grey whale migration, the Milky Way through night vision goggles, more drugs than you can imagine and many other things. Strangest would be a UFO. I crap you not. I was on midwatch 00000400 or midnight to 4 am. I was the lookout and noticed this light in the distance. We weren't by land and the radar didn't show anything. I watched this light gain and lose altitude and go back and forth for over an hour. I was pretty transfixed by this thing. I wish it could have gotten closer. Scariest would be 60 feet waves. We were off the Oregon coast when a big ass storm came down from the Gulf of Alaska. We were getting tossed around like a rag doll and nobody was allowed to go outside, but you could still go to the bridge and such. Well, I went up there and saw waves passing us that were 10 feet higher than the bridge. I went up one deck to where the lookout was and for as far as the eye could see there were massive waves. That storm fricked our boat up. A lot of stuff got bent or smashed. Lost all the gear off the fantail. It was crazy. Made me feel very small. Right whales suck because they're so dumb and will run into your ship. If you see one, you basically stop spinning your props so you don't chop them up. A fully formed waterspout at night. It was about 1,500 yards off our starboard quarter and closing. We got shot at by drug smugglers. I saw the guy try and light himself on fire. Okay, you might have to elaborate on those last two. That waterspout must have been wild. Becalmed in middle of night while racing Santa Barbara to King Harbor, staring into black calm water when an explosion of phosphorescence appeared deep below us and grew to a large 50 ft diameter. I've seen lots of phosphorescence, including dolphin light tubes earlier that same race, but nothing like that light bomb. Probably not too mysterious, but super cool and a bit spooky to experience. Diving Palanca Gardens in Cozumel in about 70 feet of water. A lovely drift dive and then a 3 foot, give or take an inch, grouper swam into my field of vision. Something seemed off with its movement and then I noticed an 8-inch jagged bite out of its dorsal region. It kept swimming awkwardly with a faint trail of chum following. There were no other apex predators around, but for the rest of the dive I was on edge. I would have been fine spotting a white tip reef or even a tiger shark, not knowing though. I was sitting wheel watch on a private yacht headed south along the west coast of Central America. It was about 4:30 am. I picked up another vessel on one of the radars. It was about 10 miles out to the southwest headed east. I watched the blip race across the screen at an incredible speed and thought that it must be a warship to be going so fast. I took the binoculars and stepped out onto the wing station and started glassing the horizon. I saw the silhouette of a small cabin class twin engine airplane, about the size of a Cessna 430, flying about 100 feet above the water, with no running lights on. I'm thinking drugs. US Navy merchant marine here. Going through the Straits of Hormuz a couple years ago had 3 Iranian corvette patrol boats harassing us during our transit, crossing our bow 50 yards ahead of us, pointing their 3-inch deck guns at us and just doing close maneuvering towards us, basically playing chicken on the water. We were with the USS Enterprise battle group at the time. They scrambled 2 jets to do a low flyby, and what I know, they hightailed it off into the horizon. Enlisted sailor in the US Navy here. We were in the middle of the Pacific in transit from Yokosuka to Guam, and I was on aft lookout at around 3 am. It was pitch black, calm and quiet. We were going about 18 knots when this green light shoots up out of the water, about 80 yards from the ship. It went up about 20-30 feet in the air pretty quickly, about 2 seconds, paused, and then vanished. I immediately called it into the bridge and combat central. and they said they caught it on the camera and had no idea what it was. Our sonar dome happened to be non-operational at the time, so most of the crew chalked it up to a submarine shooting a flare. But I don't buy that. I know what flares look like, and this thing wasn't burning or emanating from a source. It was just light, thick, neon green, smooth steady light. Sailing a regatta at Lake Lanier in Georgia when I was about 19. Sky turns black, air pressure drops. I'd been through this once before tornado. We were racing at the southern end of the lake and apparently it had just touched down at the northern end, about 11 miles away. Chase boats came out and we flew into the beach, left everything rigged and booked it into the basement. About a minute later, whoosh, it was there. I was a commercial fisherman, and we have this thing that I called a roller that rolls the fishing net up after it's on the boat. I was wearing gloves to pick the salmon out of the net as it's getting rolled up, and my glove got stuck. I got dragged through and my arm went through and was crushed. I heard it snap 3 or 4 times, and then someone at the controls stopped the roller. I pulled my arm out and it's hanging off me going in several different directions. It sucked, but I'm glad I have my arm still. I have 3 plates and a bunch of scars. I have no feeling in some of my fingers and part of my forearm. I will never go back to commercial fishing ever again. Sweet, a sailor thread, was Coast Guard for 6 years. 2 quick stories. When we dump poop overboard, through a grinder piping system, dolphins used to jump in and out of it face first till it was done. Second story, was on watch on the bridge when the sea came alive as far as the eye could see about 180 degrees around the boat maybe 8 miles away. Was visible to the naked eye and freaking horrifying through Luminous. I was the only one on the bridge. The other guy was doing a round inside the cutter and flipped my crap. Like serious panic attack. Ran down and woke the skipper who joined me on the bridge. It's like crack of dawn off the San Diego. Small crew that just launched and went right to bed to nurse hangovers, and the skipper flips his crap too. The boiling is getting closer and we're both confused, frightened enough to not act but still be freaking. Like when you think you should scream but don't want it to wind up being nothing and people think you're crazy. About 5 minutes into this weird scenario the dude returns from his round and joins us in the confusion for a minute till finally the skipper, through the Luminous, goes oh frick. They're fricking dolphins. Sure enough, moments later the vessel is surrounded with dolphins, so many they made the sea come alive for about 8 miles all around us. It was like for about 30 minutes till they finally all migrated off. Incredibly beautiful and frightening before we realized what it was. Scared the frick out of me. You have been visited by the Doggo Yoda comment master, so that strength always accompanies you. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.